Wait. What?
Welcome to Why Believe. I'm your host, Chad Ostrowski.
And I am this week's guest, Brendan Michael.
So, Brendan, tell me a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm a PA resident, and my line of work is I teach English literature to high school students. I do that at a private Christian school just outside the city of Philadelphia. So that is my day-to-day work. I recently finished graduate school for a master's in English literature. So you could say that is my bread and butter, and that is how I tend to view the world. I'm a book guy, so.
You view the world through the lens of English literature.
I'd say so. Yeah, for better or worse.
All right.
Yeah.
So, first question, what God do you believe in?
I believe in Jesus Christ, who is also known as the God of ancient Israel, Yahweh, or Jehovah, depending on who you ask, right? But
Yeah.
the God of Christianity, I would say, is the God I believe in.
All right. And why do you believe?
Well, I think for me, it mostly comes down to paradox. So I think that at the heart of Christianity, there is a series of paradoxes that are, in a strange way, when I view them, from my heart of hearts, I somehow know them to be true, and Christianity becomes almost inexplicably real. I think we could maybe work from the assumption that a lot of world faiths recognize there's something wrong with the way the world is, that there is something wrong with ourselves, our sense of self. And through various ways we are trying to attain truth. We recognize ourselves as meaning-seeking creatures, and we do that in different ways. You know, you have the Eightfold Path of Buddhism, the Pillars of Islam. In some way we are trying to get somewhere, we're trying to attain truth. But I think Christianity is a unique faith in the sense that you have a creator God who is so awesome almost as to be abstract, right? But he becomes particular. He becomes a man in a particular time, in a particular place. He walks the earth for 30 years. He's executed. A decade after his death, his followers are claiming that he has risen again. And you have this very strange group of people emerging in the Roman Empire who are praying for their accusers, who are loving the marginalized and taking care of the sick. And I think a lot of that comes from what I think is the fundamental paradox of Christianity, in that we are loved not because we're beautiful. We are made beautiful because he loves us first. And God descends into our mess, and he becomes man. He becomes dirty. He laughs and he weeps and he sings and he enters into existence, and he takes on all of the things that we associate with the hardness of being human. He takes on all of the heartache and the pain. Everything that we recognize as wrong, he takes it upon himself, and he redeems us through that. And because he is a perfect judge, he validates our desire for social justice, but also, as a God of grace, he shows us compassion when we are undeserving, and he teaches us to show compassion to others. If we say among religious founders, Jesus is very unique in the sense that not only does he claim to be God, but he speaks in these crazy paradoxes that, you know, we are to liberate the oppressed, but also forgive the oppressor. That we have to die in order to live. That we have to be weak to be strong, and all these things that seem contradictory, seem confusing, and yet when we apply them to our situation, we are seeing the transformation of the self and of, you know, social institutions, and we're seeing a God who descends into our story and makes us right, and it ends our striving. I think it was actually David Foster Wallace, ironically, who said that, we are all worshipers in some way, that we are all worshiping something, and we're all looking for something more than ourselves, that we're looking for purpose. And I think Christianity, for myself, I was raised in the church. At a point, I stepped outside of the faith, and it was like the more I wrestled with Christianity, the more it actually kind of, pinned me in ways I wouldn't expect. It's stood up to scrutiny, and it showed me that that there is a still more excellent way, that Christianity uniquely shows the power that love has in the human heart, and how it heals people who are broken, and it welcomes the outsider, and it elevates the poor, and it seeks to alleviate real ills in the world, and also how it gives us purpose, and gives me a way to live in which, at the end of it all, at the center of Christianity, Christ is dying, praying for his enemies. And I think that is the type of faith that the world needs, but not the type of faith the world would create. I feel like you're dealing with real thing when something it's a weird shape. It doesn't have all the smooth edges, and yet it fits. It seems alien, and yet it's familiar. And Christianity is that weird shape that I think is not the type of faith that a man would create. I think it is something greater.
All right. I'm really glad that I let you finish that whole thing. For listeners who aren't familiar with David Foster Wallace's work, why is it ironic that he kind of gave you that insight into us all being worshipers?
Well, David Foster Wallace is, at least in literary circles, he's known as sort of one of the archetypal postmodern novelists, and he wrote this novel called Infinite Jest. And he was a man who struggled with, I think, the weight of what postmodern thought can do in terms of, the instability of things, the instability of text, the instability of ideas, and sort of the idea that if we trace something back far enough, it's hard to find true meaning. Now, I haven't actually read Infinite Jest, so from what I've heard, David Foster Wallace is a tremendous writer, and he is struggling with real questions, with real, again, with the weight of, so how do we work out meaning in this world that we're living in right now? And the fact that he was the one who said that man is a worshiper, and that any of you who think you're not worshiping something, you're kidding yourself, and you're probably worshiping yourself, or you're worshiping the idea of not worshiping. So it's this circular thing. But at the end of the day, no matter what we're believing in, we're still worshiping.
If I ever interview atheists for this podcast, I'm very interested to get their take on that. One other thing that I wanted to dig into a little bit, you mentioned that for a time you fell away from Christianity. So tell me that story.
Yeah, well, I did grow up in the church. I was born in Texas, and so my first exposure to Christianity was Southern Baptist, which for a lot of people listening to this probably has connotations, and people make assumptions about the Baptist Church, many of which are true, but some of which
aren't or are
true. Yeah, okay. Absolutely. But others aren't necessarily true. And I think that my parents did an amazing job. I have 5 older siblings. I'm the youngest of 6, and we were all raised to believe the Bible as the inerrant Word of God, and that Christianity was not about going to church, that it was about relationship at the bottom, that it was about belief in Christ as a means of attaining reconciliation with God, with our Creator, and not just a means of racking up points or trying to be a good person. And so, I credit my parents with instilling that in me. I think when I went away to school, and when I started to explore the faith and attempt to either make it my own or figure out whether it was for me at all, that was when I did a lot of reading. I did a lot of conversationing. I talked with a lot of people, and people that I respected who weren't necessarily Christians, and And again, I discovered C.S. Lewis, who was essential to me, reading Mere Christianity and then everything he's written after that. And so that was a huge pivotal turning point, because here was a man who was an atheist and an extremely learned, well-read, intellectual man, a Don at Oxford, who somehow embraced Christianity, became one of its greatest champions, at least in the West, in the 20th century. And so his writings and his way of understanding, his understanding of narrative and of myth and of story, and viewing Christianity as a narrative. I read somewhere that every story is essentially the same, or every good story is the same arc. It's fall, redemption, reconciliation in some way. And whether you believe that or not, the point is that it's.
I don't think David Foster Wallace would agree.
Well, exactly. Exactly. The other thing was, people say every story is only one of two stories. A stranger comes to town, or somebody leaves home. So, I mean, that's something else too. So you can break every story down into that.
Okay.
But anyway, that's beside the point. I think that the fact that Lewis had a way of approaching Christianity that was accessible, but also thoughtful, and that I think Christianity at its heart, I think, can be understood by a child, but it can obviously be wrestled through and debated by very learned men, and that's another reason why it's a weird shape, because it can do both of those things, and it's still, its truth is still there, but I think Christianity stands up to scrutiny, and the more that you walk into it and wrestle with it and get deeper and deeper into it, the more complex and I think real it becomes. That's why I think it's a strange reality, and why for me it was sort of like, this doesn't seem like something that people made up to deal with their problems or to make themselves feel better, because Christianity doesn't always make you feel better, but it does make you feel like, okay, I think that there is a secret to all of this that maybe we're all guessing at, and Christianity, bizarrely, is that secret.